one. We feel it's best for you. There will be help coming from other sources. We want you to be in the light on it. Come to God. We want you to be happy with it. You won't be able to accomplish it for a while. And that's the message from the church, guys.
Thank you.
Right on. Thank you. That's a good
That was
one.
beautiful. Beautiful.
You're welcome.
Affirmation. There you go, everybody. We're moving forward. Oh,
I could segue in with the report that from when I met with the attorney last week, if people would like to have an update.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I spoke with a gal named Sue Wondersea who works at a title company to talk about how we do or do not have title to our church building. And she was not able to resolve it herself. She works more on the residential end of things, and even a commercial wouldn't assist. And she said, go see either Karen Olson or another attorney. And I work with Karen, so I went to see her. And it's kind of a three-phase process, it looks like. The document that Jerry Agnew drew up back in the 90s, changing our name from First Spiritualist Church of Duluth to Lake Superior Interfaith, does look like it will be acceptable, but there are portions where it says it includes Duluth and portions where it doesn't. So she has to make that change first, and that takes getting an affidavit from one of our members, of which Jean Quacco has stepped up to do. That will take a couple of weeks. And then she will take that affidavit and some additional documentation to St. Louis County and hopefully get us formally registered there, both as the recorded owner. And she said that the corporate document in the name change will suffice for the conveyance. And she's also checking back into the abstract to make certain that the original title was in the church's name. And if that is all those dots connect and there is a chain with no clouds and no defects, then that should clear the way for us. And then she said that we don't need to be listed with the Secretary of State's office, but we will need to contact a CPA. She was not going to assist us in getting a tax identification number, and that we still don't have one that is afforded to us under the name of Lake Superior Interfaith. So I wanted to get the title ownership of the building squared away first, and then get a tax identification number, of which is another couple of hoops to run through with the IRS, and then we'll be good to go. And then we'll have solidification of all of our legal ducks will be in a row, and then we can move on to whatever else we care to transition into. But it was important that we get all this housekeeping in order first. But we are in the move. It is going to take us a little while longer. And so, Jill, I would say you were probably right on when it says it's going to take a little while.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Okay.
Where would we be without you?
How are we doing financially? How are we doing financially?
I would
My
say,
knowledge-
I don't think Andrew's here right now to say. I'd say that on a month-to-month basis, that we're probably fairly equal. We still have reserves. We have some investment accounts that provide us a nice little cushion and a nest egg. So during the course of COVID and the majority of 2020, the donations were down a bit, of which we could anticipate, but also some of our expenses were down. So we're really pretty much right on the level there. And then we do have our nest egg. So I think the state has just lifted some of the restrictions on gathering, and I think we can start to evolve into that through spring once we create some protocols we feel comfortable with. And I think as we start to get back together, it feels like the energy around our continued growth and solidification feels really good. So I think that we'll do well as we come into the balance of this year.
Great.
Sounds good.
That was
Thank
going to be my question about the reopening. I know, has anybody seen those guidelines? Have they been posted yet? Or
No,
and have you as a board kind of talked about a timeline at all, or have
No.
an idea of when you'd like to see us back in the building?
Aren't we waiting?
We touched on it briefly. There's just been so many other things that have sort of been, it took precedence over that because it is kind of up in the air right now. So we couldn't really make any solid decisions at this point. We did talk about, as the weather gets nicer, if the church isn't up to the standards of opening inside, we could find outdoor venues or something where people could choose to gather. We also talked about doing some gathering and still having the Zoom service available also for people who chose to join us via Zoom to continue that. So there might be a dual thing going on for a while until things are more clear. Right now, I'm not sure what the CDC is exactly saying. The issue is more with our building per se than churches can't open, because churches can't open. You have to have a certain capacity. You have to have airflow. You have to have an exit. You have to have an entrance. You have to have cleanup. I mean, there are guidelines set forth. We just haven't really looked at them super closely to see what we could do. But and also vaccination, that's another issue. Some people choose to get it, other people are choosing not to get it. We do know that vaccinated people by the CDC said that they can meet without social distancing and masks. However, in our case, being a building when you don't ask people, I mean, that's sort of personal health information. We would probably still require masks and social distancing once we open for a while. But nothing's been said. Okay, Carol, go ahead.
My feeling is, I mean, I hear different things about this vaccination deal that we're totally safe. And my daughter-in-law is a doctor of pharmacology in San Diego, blah, blah, blah. And she has even stated, and she's vaccinated, you still can spread the virus. You can still be a carrier of the virus if you're vaccinated. So what is this deal that everybody's so safe if you're vaccinated? It keeps you from being in the hospital if you actually are holding the virus. And so my feeling with the church, I mean, it's going to be really hard to be there and not have a meal, not to socialize, everybody milling around the kitchen. How are you going to be 6 foot distancing in our little space? And my feeling is like, hold off a couple months. What's the rush?
Yeah.
May, June, I don't care. What about this virus, the variant of whatever, how it's mutating? Well, it's going crazy in Texas and other places already. In fact, Barb Steger, she was like on her board last year. Her daughter's an RN, is in Texas, said it has mutated so fast, and there's people now really getting the viruses all over again. It's just spreading down there, and they're not doing any masks. They can go into the bars, restaurant. It's crazy stuff. It's like, why rush?
Yeah.
Moving. I mean, I would love to be back there, but I personally don't want to be back until we can get set up on Zoom there, where people who from out of state, out of the city, can just Zoom in to our service. Let's take our time and do it right. Let's not rush. This is just me. Why rush? This is working, and let's just be safe on all levels. Amen. That's just me. Okay, I said enough. Who else wants to speak to that subject? Anybody? Nobody. That's so all is well. Let's just take it a day at a time and watch things evolve. And the good news, there's hardly any, if any, of the virus in this area right now, from what I understand from somebody who works in the hospitals, and she works with cancer patients and whatever. She said this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, only 2 people in St. Mary's with the virus, nobody in St. Luke's. A month or so ago, there was like over 100.
Wow.
She works between St. Mary's and St. Luke's. I'm not going to give her name. But anyway, that's like really profound. But things can change. People are coming and going. It's summer coming, spring, people are driving up from the cities from wherever. Things can change until things are really stabilized across our country. You know, we just need to follow our heart, and it's all good. It's all working out how it's supposed to. I need to be quiet. I go on too long. So, what else? Does anybody else have to add to that? Take away from that? Whatever. Shirley, there-
I'm curious to know, just in a totally informal way, just because we've got a small representation of folks, if your choices were maybe 3 different choices, at present, not to come at all. Like I think as of the 15th of March, we have the ability as a religious organization to hold the space. Who here would have an interest in coming next Sunday if we had some protocols in place, everybody masked, and there was sterilizer and we distanced? Would anybody have any interest in coming? Or are you, okay, 1? Okay, and would everybody else rather wait for another couple of months?
Wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good, because that's kind of what I want to know. I want to know how many people are feeling put out by the potential, because I believe that if we had the space open with protocols in place, I had recommended that maybe we would do something along the lines of literally creating appointments, because my concern is that it's a semi-public venue and we can't just have anybody in that is not in agreement with maintaining some protocols. And we would have to literally open the doors, have the service, gather, acknowledge each other, and then depart. We wouldn't have it. It would be a transition to bring people back together, but it would not be the same as it had been a year prior. We would take a bit at a time. So we can either wait until everything can be squared away, but I don't know how long that's going to be, because there's certainly so much uncertainty. That's what we can be certain of, is that there's a lot of uncertainty about the way the virus operates and how it impacts us. We've certainly seen that flux over this last year and a half. And I think we will continue to for this upcoming year.
Great.
Yes.
Carol?
I just want to point out that the previous board spent a good chunk of time on all of this. It was a different world then, I know, but Dave Fritz, who's a great researcher, did a lot of research. I also got a lot of information from an attorney, shared all of this with the board. I know you guys are working with it, but just a reminder that my understanding is our building as it is, protocols are, it's going to take some pretty fancy protocols to meet requirements with our old building. Our infrastructure just doesn't support anything I know about it. And yes, I'm not an expert. I'm not in any hurry to come back until I know we're safe. So I'm glad we'll continue to have Zoom. Thank you, Carol.
Yes. Such is my gut feeling. So,
Phyllis?
Lisa made a good point that we can advertise, communicate protocols to our community, but our church community, but we would have to have some really clear protocols for anyone coming in who was not aware. Visitors, people who are coming in for the first time and don't realize what our protocols are. So we'd have to be pretty obvious in our protocols before we could, I feel, clearly come together as a community again. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Carol Condrath?
Well, I know things take time planning, and I want to thank the board for all your work you've been doing. But I mean, even the governor says, wait until July 4th and then we'll see, so I guess I don't understand. Did you say next week people wanted to come and you were asking?
Well, what I was saying is that the governor made the announcement that as of March 15th, religious organizations could gather again, should they choose. There are many congregations who do care to gather regardless or despite any parameters. They feel the need to gather. And so the governor finally lifted the restriction on the potential of that gathering. It had been a restricted activity up until this point by the state's mandate.
Oh, okay. Now I guess I figure. I guess I just I consider us just to be such a different type of group. We're more like a family. And I guess I'm thinking, well, even families, of 50, they're supposed to wait until till July 4th to even consider doing anything inside. Outside, I think it's different. And I like someone's idea of maybe we can gather, for some picnic or something somewhere like out at.
As the weather warms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you again for all your work. It's wonderful. Phyllis
It is.
McCoy looks like she wants to say something.
It is wonderful. All the work that you've done is just extraordinary. And I want to ask for some update on the unity issue later. But apparently Governor Walz has said, yes, you can gather in churches 100%, 50% in restaurants. But just because, and you're exactly right, just because we get an indicator or a rule from the governor doesn't mean that it applies directly to us. We know our community and we know what is possible for us. We have one way, two ways into our sanctuary. So we come in from outside or we come up the stairs, and yeah, the question still hangs in the air, doesn't it? How would we manage traffic so that everybody was secure? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
On a side note, I was down at I took a walk on the lake walk yesterday. I went from Canal Park west out to Grand Avenue and back. I mean, because it's less traveled. And then I thought, oh, I've done a really good walk today, so I'm going to treat myself to a coffee at Caribou. So I turned the corner, and Canal Park Drive was a zoo of people. And most of them were not wearing masks. So it was a beautiful day, and I understand, but it was like, that was, I made a mistake. I turned around and went right back to my car because there were so many people. I don't know who they were. I didn't recognize anyone. Not that that makes any difference, but they could have been out of towners. They could have been locals, but obviously, there were a lot of people not wearing masks and getting close together and standing in large groups. And I just thought, oh, okay, well, just because the governor says it's okay to get out and do that kind of stuff doesn't mean that it really is.
Yeah.
So it's just a side note that,
Well, it was interesting. I dropped my daughter off because she works with the homeless people who've been tested positive or are waiting for test results at the Radisson Annex. And all these months, there's been nobody there, no cars in the parking lot, a few people here and there. Yesterday, there was no place to park in the parking lot. The hotel was just packed. And so something has switched.
The weather.
Whether it's the weather or hockey, I don't know. There was something going on at the deck, a hockey game or something, but I don't know. The hotel was just jam-packed with cars.
I think it was spring fever. I drove on Superior, up from Masaba and toward home on West 27th. The cars were bumper to bumper, virtually all the way parked. Just solid parking. So the weather brought people out to wherever, whether they were doing shopping, whether they were in the restaurants along there, the bars, they were just packed.
And we're not going to know then for 2 or 3 weeks whether there's a spike because of all this activity.
Right. Yeah. So.
This is Steve. Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I just want us to remember that our community has a lot more at-risk people than the common social environment that's out there. So we also have to be mindful of that.
Yes.
Such a good point, Steve.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
And
so,
we don't know how enforceable, if somebody walked into the church, say, and without a mask, how enforceable, who's going to do what if they object?
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to have reservations.
Yeah, it's the aliens we have to be concerned about.
But we're all one. There are no aliens.
No, okay.
The other thing a friend of mine suggested is that there's one protocol we could easily put into place, which would be to get one of those handheld thermometer things. And if people decide to walk in the door, you can easily take their temperature as they walk in the door. And not that that's a great, I mean, just because they don't have a temperature doesn't mean they're not a carrier. But it is. A lot of people are doing it in. Well, when I was in Belize at Christmas time, a lot of the places we went, like the hardware store or just not necessarily the grocery store, but there were certain places that we went where there was somebody at the door with a thermometer taking your temperature. And it is one thing.
I know that they
the-
were doing the
very-
temperature checks previously at any of the doctor clinics, the St. Luke's, Sencha. Anytime you had an appointment, or, whether it was an eye appointment or whatever, there was the protocol of having someone before you entered the office space, kind of in the doorway there with that thing. But they're no longer doing that.
Right.
Oh,
They've given that up for probably, I would, over a
Wow.
month. They've abandoned that. And I'm not sure what the reasons for that were, but I know, and I found that out not only by having a doctor's appointment and going and like, oh, they're not doing temperature checks, but also Rick Yeomans works at St. Luke's part-time, and he said that, yeah, they're not doing that, but I don't remember what he said the reason was as to why. I guess they felt it didn't really change a whole lot, that generally if people had a fever, they pretty much knew it and they weren't showing up, so
Yeah,
they
right.
felt it didn't warrant having somebody there doing that anymore, so they just dropped it.
It's not a real indicator of COVID. And 40 people, they say, are carriers. So we have to be really careful during this time.
Okay.
Right, just because you don't have a fever doesn't mean you can't be a carrier. It just
Right.
hasn't manifested in your body. That's just my logic. I'm no medical person. It's just, there's some illogical thoughts that people want to think is logical all over. Like, I don't know. So the temperature thing is really good, but Phyllis, yes.
I probably got COVID in December because I was the screening person at Presbyterian Homes facility since September. And I had to screen every employee who came in. Yes, there were employees who came in and said, I really don't feel well. I have a temperature. Should I be coming to work? Well, duh, no. But but I spiked a fever the first 2 or 3 days, but I didn't have a fever all the time. I only had a fever in the evening. It was like having hot flashes.
oh,
So yes, there was fever, but it wasn't all the time. And if I'd had my temperature taken going into a public place in the morning, I wouldn't have indicated that I had COVID. So we got to be careful about I know that facility tried to be very careful. Everybody had to have their temperature taken. But now they're coming in the regular employee entrance, taking their own temperatures and answering the questions for themselves. So it's self-monitoring to come into a very vulnerable population because it's a transitional care facility. Anyway, we have to be real careful about accepting the accepted mode and really understanding that it can come up in many forms and you can be a carrier and not show symptoms. So
Thank you. Yes.
yeah. We got to take it easy, I think.
Yeah, just common sense.
Yeah, for a while. It doesn't feel to me like it would be reasonable to come together physically before June 1st. But that could change too. We could have another spike in the Duluth area and with one of these variants. And so we have no idea. I think it's not time to vote on it. I mean, I think we should have a show of hands about how we
Yeah.
feel. I agree. I'm glad we did that this morning. But as a community, I don't think a vote is reasonable yet.
Right.
I
feels
agree.
like-
Cheryl?
I-
Cheryl, do you-
It occurred to me during this discussion, one of the gifts COVID offers us is to be reminded we're not our bodies. I miss those Sunday hugs as much as anybody. Believe me, if I didn't have my cat, I would be really, really in trouble. Because I get to hug him all the time, whether he likes it or not. But we're not our bodies. We have this way, and we actually could be connecting with each other every day individually in prayer, in meditation, in whatever, as well as phone calls, emails. There are so many ways we can connect in our minds with technology. It will be nice to come together again, but we have so many other ways to enjoy our oneness, our connection. So food
Thanks,
for thought.
Carol. I want to give everybody a virtual hug right now. I miss those hugs
Me
big
too.
time.
Yes, hugs, hugs.
And I gave you really hard.
Hugs. Laura.
Yeah. So, any other discussion someone would like to bring up?
Well, I'll bring up Carolyn Sheets, just because she has written to a handful of us. She was due to be sprung from the Benedictine rehab on actually Saturday, because
Yeah.
Friday I was going to be a part of some of her modifications internally of her place. But the Benedictine didn't get the paperwork quite processed, and it'll be until Monday. So she's feeling kind of physically exhausted. She's feeling a little bit antsy about being able to get home, as you could well imagine, after a few weeks. But she is continuing to recover. She's really tired. She appreciates all the prayers. She wrote to me just a moment ago and said that she was sorry, but she couldn't get the internet to work at the Benedictine to be a part of the Zoom service
darn.
and speak with us personally. But she really appreciates our prayers and love, and keep it coming.
Yay.
Yes.
Cool.
So she's tough. Whoops.
And full of light.
Right.
we-
Oh, yeah.
Could, I don't know how you have all been communicating about the unity question, but is there an overview we could get of what the minister had to say to the board?
Well, that was quite a while
Somebody's
ago.
got a phone call in the background that they
Yeah,
need to
I-
mute themselves for, please. Whoever just got a phone call, please mute themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's Steve.
Okay. I think each person on the board might have something to say about what they remember, because it was quite a while ago, and we only had the one Zoom meeting with Reverend Pratt from Unity of Minneapolis. And he started by saying he was speaking just as himself, that he was not speaking as the Unity Church, and that if there were specific questions that we wanted of that organization, we would need to speak to someone at unity.org or Unity Village. But he was happy to speak with us as to our questions about what Unity is about, what kind of relationship we would have, what restrictions there might be, the time frame. We talked very much in generalities. He was very, very helpful. He was very excited. He was very supportive. He was open to anything that we would want or need in helping us. They have basically the time frame. Once you decide to open that door and transition to becoming a Unity organization, the maximum is 5 years. And I'm
The
not
max-
sure. The maximum
maximum.
that they will shelter us and support us to transition is 5 years.
Oh.
If they're helping us along and at the end of 5 years, we're not there yet, we kind of get dropped, is my understanding. They have a maximum amount of time that they give you to make that transition with their support. And the support is not financial in any way. They are not like some other denominations where they sort of, raise the fledgling up and support it financially till it can make it on its own. That's not the way Unity works. We must prove ourselves to be stable financially, to be able to hire a Unity minister. Yeah, so it's a long process, and there are certain things that we do need to meet. And I personally feel that I'm not sure we can do it in 5 years from now, especially with the COVID thing going on. I think once we're clear of that and we're able to function more in a normal level where we can advertise and promote and grow, then we can start maybe doing a 5-year thing. But right now, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're exploring it. We're finding out a lot of information. The board feels, I think, generally that we align very much with the principles. They don't have dogma. They have 5 principles. We have a few more than that, so we can maybe work on paring ours down somewhat to begin with. I don't know where the starting point would be, but he was open to the streaming. They do streaming of their services at 9:30. And he was very open to having us stream the service, no cost, just free streaming off of Facebook. If we can do that from our facility, once we open it, we could stream a Unity service so people could attend that if they so wanted to. So that we would have a Unity service per se, but we wouldn't have our own minister at that time. And I think Lisa asked a lot of good questions during that meeting that we had, as far as, we're so used to being very independent and our own speakers and how that would go. And I believe his general answer was that you can go to a Unity church in New Mexico, you can go to one in Florida, you can go to one in Minneapolis. They're all different. They're dictated pretty much by the community and who they hire as their minister. They have that relationship, and they provide for the community what that community wants. And they're very open to having speakers. They have speakers a lot in Unity that it's not always the minister. They have guest speakers, and that's perfectly okay. It seems like it's a very, I don't want to say loose, but they're very open.
Flexible.
And accepting and flexible of what your community wants. Is, the 5 principles, of course, are the construct that unifies and brings those people together, and it revolves around those 5 principles. But there's many things that can happen in a Unity church that I believe would be, they have Course in Miracles, they have yoga groups, they have tarot card readings, they have, angels, they have all of that you could have your own little interest groups functioning under that umbrella. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, one of my concerns, having been a member of Lake Superior Interfaith for the last 20 some odd years, is that we have this ministerial leadership derived from our congregation, and whether or not we would be able to continue that. And I think he walked a really beautiful line, kind of walking between the worlds. he said it's interesting. He feels like the consciousness of the congregation is very much held by the ministerial leadership, and I agree with that. And he said that Unity is going to encourage both a Unity teacher, so that there's consistency with the Unity principles provided to the congregation in its whole, and that over the course of those 5 years, the ideal scenario would be that we would tend to the congregation, grow, and be able to compensate a minister at that time. That was my interpretation. But that he said it's interesting simultaneously that he's graduating 2 apprentices and 2 ministers out of his church, and that there are not enough ministers to meet the interests of many Unity congregations. He said while there are some really large congregations in a variety of metropolitan areas, that there's thousands of congregations that have only like 50 to 100 members, and there's simply not enough ministers to go around. So they don't want to preclude people from seeking to become an evolving Unity minister, congregation. So I think it's a little combination of, like, you know, meeting in the middle. I wanted to see that we still had the means within the principles of Unity to maintain a lot of the independence that we've had, to be guided by Spirit in our congregation. And I felt like we were met with a lot of receptivity on his part. He said it was really interesting that there are many places that subscribe deeply to the Bible, others more to just a spiritual connection. And he said it really is ultimately informed by the congregational membership within the parameters of the Unity principles. Would you say that that's a fairly, you think that's a similar understanding, Denise, Sue, Lita?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got the feeling from him when he was speaking, you know, to your comments and questions, that it's not even so much that we have a minister, but that we have a spiritual leader, someone whose continuity lasts longer than the lifetime of a president. So it's somebody that's more long-term, more, you know, not, I don't know, more connected with what's been going on before President A and after President B and after President C and after President D. So that and it may have to be somebody who is a paid person, not
Sure.
necessarily a minister, but just a spiritual connector through all of the different board proceedings that we have.
Right,
But
they do need to be certified by Unity. I felt like he emphasized that there are certified Unity teachers and there are certified Unity ministers, and that in order to be a part of and anybody is welcome to go to unity.org and look under the subheading of an evolving church. They lay out parameters that we need to meet over the course of that time. And so we internally have to make determinations about whether or not we'd like to be in keeping with those parameters. And then we need to be able to prove ourselves out over that period of time. So it really is, it's like a meeting, it's of both of those places.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there it is.
Great.
Oh my, cool.
Yeah, these are the 5 principles, and they can be written differently. Each church even has a little different writing on some of them, but this is like the basic.
Cool. Thank you, Steve.
What are the economic obligations and how small or large? In fact, he didn't, do you want to ask that question directly? Or you can answer.
That's really great, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah.
You bet.
Go ahead and just ask the question. What are the economic parameters? You know, how small or large would the obligation be?
I
don't
don't
remember
think
talking
we
about that.
asked specifically that. I do know that we would have to be self-sustaining, that
Mhm.
they do not supply us with monies of any kind for building, maintenance, upkeep, staff, etc. That is all on us.
Right.
They do provide, guidance, outline, leadership support in other ways, but not monetarily.
Right. I'm thinking in
we-
terms of the person that we need to have to guide us through the unity process.
And I think the way the question went was answered over the course of the hour that we were chatting with him, specifically about, okay, like I wanted to know where the rubber met the road. And he said, we would start with the Unity teacher. And I said, do we pay the Unity teacher? And he kind of smiled and said, I imagine that you probably have some place where they would be able to stay, once we get past the COVID part. And then, there would be some accommodation, but that really we end up kind of making it up as we go along. There isn't any pre-fixed amount. It's like, oh, we have to come up with $10,000, and that $10,000 is how we sponsor a teacher to come and teach us. He literally said they would come up during the course of a weekend, like a Friday, Saturday. We would have a certain number of people to attend like a workshop along those lines. And he kept on speaking of it. I felt my interpretation of what he was saying is that it really is a spirit-guided, consciousness expanded process to experience. He talked a lot about the importance of ministerial leadership being in place to continue to hold the consciousness. So something that would transcend, as Sue is making reference to, the fixed person of a board or president that changes over time. That the reality of how he's seen congregations grow is that they're in keeping with the unity principles and the ministerial leaderships holding a particular consciousness, which I have to say that by default, if you will, in absence of a singular person at Lake Superior Interfaith, I think it actually has happened. I believe that we are a spirit-guided body and that we have a myriad of people who step into those places. But the potential of it being unity would kind of consolidate and aggregate it more into one individual party. And I think we also talked at the board level of what a challenge it can be sometimes when the board or the board president ends up being the default authority in the church body. And in the absence of a minister, sometimes, there are challenges that arise in the body of a congregation that are really hard to depersonalize, and having a minister might be helpful. So I think that we've had it both ways. We had Reverend Hutchinson for 30 or 40 years, and then we've kind of gone about our own manner of carrying on for this last 20 some odd years. And there seems to be this interest in coming back to a different construct, if you will. And yeah, I'll stop.
Very good, Lisa.
Carol Conrad. Carol Conrad. Hand us up.
Okay, this is completely separate from the beliefs and structure of becoming under this umbrella. My question is, I had in my mind that one of the things we were looking for was a place where we could become a tax exempt place, because we didn't have quite enough money for the one system that we had, and we were looking for another way to do it. And I was thinking, now this unity umbrella, to me, I mean, not as invested in, the whole unity spirituality or whatever their principles and anyway, not so much the unity church thing. But I thought maybe this was a good umbrella for us, but I don't know is this connected with that need to be a tax exempt church? And how much do we pay here under the system we have now? I remember at one point it was like everybody was astounded we were paying that much, and then I thought we were finding something that was an umbrella that we could kind of fall under, and nobody was bugging us about it. What
As
is
of
that all about?
So there is, believe it or not, the Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church, that community church is actually a congregational order of churches, not unlike Lutheran or Methodist or anything else.
Right, yeah.
And the ICCC, the International, I believe, Council for Community Churches, is the national body that we are currently an affiliate of, and we pay $1,000 a year for that membership. That membership does afford us a tax exempt status, because if we were to be our own independent entity and not be a community church, let's say we decided to become Lake Superior Spiritual Center, we would have to become a 501c3, and like multitudinous other nonprofits, there's a whole other bureaucratic, and I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but there's a whole other administrative process that you have to maintain above and beyond what you do as a church. And I believe that the determination 22 years ago, when they were shifting from the spiritualist to community church construct, that the potential of that was discussed, and the understanding was that that was more of an encumbrance internally than the small size of our congregation would warrant. So the determination was to go with this national affiliation. I believe that what would happen is we would switch from Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church. We would not have that name anymore. It would be like First Unity of Duluth or something. And we would become a member of, I think it's called Unity Ministries Worldwide, I believe is what their national organization is. And I believe we asked if there was a formal membership fee, and I don't believe that there was a fixed fee, but there is an anticipation that as we would grow and have the capacity, that there would be some tithe, and there's customs that are established, but I don't know that there was a dollar affixed to it. But we would not be a 501c3. We would continue to be a charitable religious organization. And I still believe that we should probably have our own tax identification number, but I can't necessarily speak to the absolute refinements to that, because I'm still getting an idea of what the variations on that theme are. Does that help?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
helped a
So
lot.
my question still is, are we unhappy or scared with the, what, I don't know, maybe scared, is it not working to just keep it the way it is? And maybe, incorporate unity beliefs, which I think we already do, but anyway, that's aside. Is there a problem, or is it too much money, what we're paying now, or isn't it covering us?
I would like to think that it's not, in this instance, a monetary motivation, but I won't speak to that as an individual. I mean, other people can throw in their 2 cents here, if you will. I believe that where we are right now is in this exploratory stage. There's not definitively a determination made that we will be going with unity. There is a body of people who, for a couple of years, have been studying unity principles, and that seems to really enhance the prospect of the potentiality. I think certainly I am not a part of that mix of people, but as an individual, I happen to have been somebody who's gone to unity churches in a myriad of places and appreciated them and found them most akin to Lake Superior Interfaith, and didn't have any particular opposition or absolute determination to see that we go towards the unity model. But I wanted to go through the exploration. I wanted to know, what does that really look like? What of what we have been, would we be making any sacrifices of ways that we love the way we operate or have now? Is this just an arc in time that after 20 some odd years, as we've kind of mentioned, we are an older congregation, portions of us are aging out, and we certainly have seen a diminished number of individuals in our congregation over time. And some people have left the congregation for a variety of reasons to go seek out other congregations in town. Some of them have just stopped going. Some of them literally have left, they've slipped the mortal coil. I think it's really interesting, because I just find this to be an incredibly
self-reflective process. And I mean the self of our body as a church, not necessarily each of us as individuals, but then each of us as individuals as well. We really get to look at how we hold ourselves together at present, and whether we are shepherding, if you will, or ministering. It seems to me that part of the perception is, Carol, if I could be so bold as to speak, that when we look upon ourselves as Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church, there are other things that we would like to grow and do within ourselves as a congregation and within our community. And that when we look outside of ourselves at other congregations or church bodies in the country that we have an awareness of, that unity feels the most akin to us, and it appears as though how they are having an effect on their congregation members, growing within themselves, and then having an impact on their community and creating an invitation that would continue to potentially expand the spiritual awareness, that unity seems to be a model that people are leaning towards. And it so happens that Rick had come a few years ago, and a mix of people started studying the principles. So the question was raised, and that's, I feel, where we are is really an exploration. I hope that helps.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Well, and I think to also put a finer point on why we're doing this now is that we found out we are a non-entity, right?
Right, that was part of it, Sue. I mean, we found out we didn't exist, so to say, on paper with the federal, state, whatever, and then our property was, so it seemed like a catalyst for us to do some, like, well, who are we and who do we want to be and where do we want to go with this?
Right.
It was an opportunity to do that. Not an excuse to do it or a reason to do it, but an opportunity to explore. And it's very much exploratory, as Lisa said. And I believe that, we want the church to survive. It's important to all of us sitting right here with our faces in these little boxes. It's a very important piece of who we are, and we want it to survive. And there is some indication that, it's struggling. And I think our community needs a shot in the arm, so to speak, a boost, some help to be self-sustaining and to grow. And because I think who we are is really important. Mm-hmm. I think we have a very important message, and I think we have very important things to offer. And I don't like it being under this little bushel basket. I think I want to just go, woo! And like, here we are. And sorry, cat. Just the potential of growth and being able to do more in our community to help and just be active and involved. And we are aging out. I mean, there's just so many of us that can only do so much, retired or not. You have X amount of energy, and that's it. And we are very small. And if we don't do something, I just don't want us to disappear. I want us to find something that's really going to shine a light on us and help us to grow.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I understand your, the energy to grow. That I may not be in that bundle so much, but I still, when you said we're in a non-entity, I'm still back to that question. Is this $1,000? Is that what's going on now? Right now we're under this, some kind of umbrella that we pay $1,000 a year. Are we still under that one? And okay, yeah. And why are we, but it's not, we're still a non-entity, even though we're under that. So why do we pay this $1,000 even? What does it do for us if we're a non-entity?
I think it's really challenging to language this, okay? When we're using this term non-entity, I don't mean to say, it's not like physically the church doesn't exist as a building anymore, or that we don't exist as a congregation anymore. It really is a matter of, on paper, legally, it so happens that without renewing certain things, that we fall off the docket. And then when I went to go do a little bit of research on that, I found out, as I've mentioned before, that at St. Louis County, the building is under the First Spiritualist Church's name, but we as taxpayers, as Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church, are the taxpayers. But the First Spiritualist Church of Duluth does not exist as an entity anymore. And it technically is the titled owner of the building.
Oh, that part. Oh.
And 22 some odd years ago, when the transition from the Spiritualist Church to Interfaith was made, there was, and Carol Giesecke or Steve Plaza might be able to put a little finer point on this, but there was a name change from Lake Superior Interfaith, from First Spiritualist Church to Lake Superior Interfaith. It was partially completed and recorded, but it did not get finally recorded, and the deed itself was not conveyed from one party to another. So that's the physical building. Then there's the information about how we as a congregation identify with ourselves and our choice to affiliate with a national entity, because you basically have your choice of being an independent entity and becoming a 501c3 and be self-governing, or you are under the aegis of a national organization. And so the shift that was made from the spiritualist organization to interfaith was in part at the time made because a number of our ministerial leadership 25 years ago, Sharon Zukas, the Quacos, and several others, had become ordained ministers up in Montreal, and they were not spiritualist ministers. And the National Spiritualist Organization called them out and said, you cannot be defining yourselves in your newsletter and providing ministerial leadership if you are not a spiritualist minister.
Oh my.
And at that time, amongst a couple of other things that were going on behind the scenes, in the transition between 95 and 98, the determination was made to shift away from the spiritualist model and into the community church model. The board and the body and the congregation looked at a variety of different options at that time, including becoming their own independent entity as a church. And the determination was made that this community church model would give them the continued freedoms that they cared to have. And we became, in August of 98, after 80 some odd years as the Spiritualist Church of Duluth, the First Spiritualist Church of Duluth, Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church. At that time, to my awareness, we were still using a tax identification number of a spiritualist church in Marshall, Minnesota. Is that true, Carol Giesecke? Oh, gee.
That's what it appeared to be when I was working with it a few years ago. Your guess that might have been one number for all spiritualist churches in Minnesota makes sense. I don't know, but we did not have an independent tax exempt ID for ourselves.
Or Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church.
I did get one, but you have found question on that, and I can see that, yeah, it would be good to, once we got all the other, everything else cleared up, to renew that one or get another one that is really ours.
And Carol Giesecke, what you actually got was from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You received a tax exempt number, which is not the same as a federal tax identification number for the entity. And that's
Yes.
Part of what we are being advised by the attorneys is an important thing. And this is why when we say we're a non-entity, we don't really mean that we're a non-entity. We still exist as a body. We still have a building. But it so happens that the particulars at the level of the legality of how we have a chain of title and a chain of authority on paper it needs to be tightened up. It's the dots are not connected right, and that's what I'm in the process of doing with the attorneys.
And it needs to be
Wow.
congruent. It needs to be congruent among all of the so-called governing agencies, that they all identify as the same way, which I think you kind of said that, but I'm just clarifying that.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and then what's really fascinating is in the course of recognizing that, it causes us at the board, and therefore now ripples down through the congregation, to really look closely at how we are, who we are, what we believe, and what's holding us together. And into the mix of that came this, the principles of unity being introduced by the study group, the interest that grew around that model, and the potential of exploring the possibility of all times, while COVID is down, has all organizations kind of in lockdown over the course of this last year. It's actually an opportune time to explore the potential of what we would like to evolve into. Maybe we stay exactly Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church. Maybe we revive from within and continue on as we have, and we continue to grow and expand under the same moniker. But if there's going to be a change, it seemed to me like an outward physical manifestation, if you will, of something that energetically was holding potential for us to make a determination about together.
So as you and Denise have pointed out, it's an opportunity, very much like the opportunity we've been reminded since the beginning of the shutdown a year ago, personally, to look at who are you, what do you value, look at yourself, look at your life, what's on the inside, what's on the outside, what's congruent, what isn't. We have been given, or we've discovered, or whatever, the opportunity to do this as a community. And we have a board ready, willing, and able to do that. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. I wanted to appreciate that to the board. That's really great.
absolutely.
Just a time note, we are over an hour now, so we need to make a decision about what next.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah,
I
I need
would,
to,
oh, Phyllis, go ahead.
no, I just need to leave. So you go
Okay.
ahead. If it only takes a couple more minutes, I'm still here.
Okay.
I would just like,
I feel relatively complete with what I have to say, and I'm hoping it feels like there's a little more context upon which to understand the nature of what's transpiring, and that we're in this amorphous state. And I kind of look at the course of this year as being the determinant process, however it goes.
Does
And
that
it
help,
seems
Carol?
like-
Carol Conrad?
Pardon me?
oh,
Carol Conrad, does that help?
oh. Okay.
Oh,
So
Carol?
she's a picture from a tarot card, and
I have to
it's,
see
and it's it really, did you ask me to show this? So was that you? I wasn't
Say
here.
I didn't see it.
I wanted to show. Anyway, she's like purging. See, she's purging.
Oh.
She's like the COVID. You know, we started out talking about the COVID, and now I'm thinking of all these, you know, issues about who we are, where we're going. You know, it is good to purge and to cleanse and to heal. So thank you.
thank
That
you.
was my little drawing today.
And
Can
I
I just-
feel,
Go ahead.
I
Go
feel
ahead, Leah.
like if we want to grow, we need a leader. We need someone who is able to put their energy and all their purpose, well, as much as one can, into that area. It just seems like that's what we need now. This is time if we want to continue to grow. That's all I have to say.
Okay. I would like to invite Virginia
Yes.
talk about her angel classes, like very briefly, because we're short on time. So we have an idea what we're talking about here.
Okay. I'd like to offer, and I've presented the board with an outline for a short 3-class course in working with angels. I know that there's some interest in it, and I would be happy to do it. I think that for me, it would be service to the church. It would be a minimal fee situation where if one person signs up, that would be the fee. But if you're multiple people at one place, the fee would not change. So it would be individual / household rather than, lots of people having to pay. And it would be 3 1-hour classes with Q&A after that could last as long as an hour. The Q&A part of it would be potentially where we could practice some things out of the lecture that started at the beginning. And for the moment, the Zoom person who has offered to help us with this class, because it'll have to be by Zoom. Her schedule is limited, so we figured out that Tuesday evenings from 6 to 8, and she suggested beginning, I think it's the I don't know, I have to look at a calendar. The last 2 Tuesdays of Thursday and the of March and the first Tuesday of April, that would be the 3 classes. And technically we will schedule them for a 2-hour slot, but we may not keep that long. The course itself is a 1-hour course, and then Q&A after, and it'll be a practicum. It's not something that you'll be left in a void. You have questions, we can try things and things like that in the Q&A part. So this is, I'm offering it. My situation is one where I really would like to support this church. I really enjoy the people that are in it. I am a spiritualist minister, non-practicing, only because life has been otherwise since I was ordained. But that isn't a point. The point is not whether I'm ordained or not. It has more to do with I would like to support this church because I think the group is an excellent one. And my way of doing that is by offering a course. All fees for the course will go only to the church. There are no fees that will come to me. It's a gift, my gift to the church. It's my way to repay already the very kind people that I have met in the church. So you can, I think that Carol is going to send out an official email that will list what's going to happen with the 3 classes as I gave it to her. And anybody who wants to can sign up. I don't know that this necessarily has to be only church members. If you have friends that are interested in it and they wish to do it, then you pay your fee, you're part of the group as far as I'm concerned. But that'll be up to Carol. Carol will be, as far as I know, the person, or she will designate a person or the board will designate a person who will take the requests for the class, and to whom and how the money will be paid directly to the church in whatever manner the church deems their thing. So I look
Thank you,
forward to
Virginia.
doing it.
Yes. Did you mention the price?
No, I was going to leave your email up to that. The price that we were talking about was $19. And I figured that $19 was not too much by any stretch of anybody's, hopefully anybody's income. And again, as I said, it would be, if you're just one person and going to do it, it would be 19. But if you're 2 or even 3 people at the same location taking it, the fee would still remain at $19 because it's per individual / household. So that's also something that if you're talking about it to people that might not actually be very active members of the church, that could be done. But that
Thank you,
might
Virginia.
have the.
We need to kind of wrap up here, my dear.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all that information.
All right. Later. Okay. Do the board members want to meet for a few minutes or not? I know it's getting long.
Sure, and I'd like you to just maybe read the prayer of protection to close us up, please.
Oh, let's just do that. We totally accept the belief that God is in charge of affairs. Whoops.
Wrong one.
Okay, I had to go. Is this what the church affirmation?
No,
No, the prayer of protection.
Any one
Where
of
is it?
them.
A statement of intent.
All of them are appropriate.
All is good.
Just
I'm
do
just saying
both,
that
Carol.
God,
Do both.
What?
Thank you, and then you can move on. Do both.
I'm going to say that we accept and believe that God is in charge of the affairs and direction of Lake Superior Interfaith Community Church. And we know that as our thoughts of trust and joyful anticipation join in harmony with the thoughts of all the members of the fellowship, we attract the right ministerial leadership to our spiritual community, and we are grateful. And I just want to say, a closing one usually for the benediction is a unity one, unless somebody wants to do a benediction. Where'd it go? I'll do this quickly. The prayer for protection, you guys. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. And all is well. Yeah, oh, great. Okay. So just briefly, board members could just hang out for a few minutes and we'll just say thank you to everybody for being here. And Steve, turn off the recorder. Okay, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you, Laura.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being
Bye.
here.
So